if podcasts still exist in 2034 and neither of us have been hit by a car or had a microphone dropped on our heads or whatever, and we're still standing, and Saudi Arabia offered to sponsor Not Another Sports Pod, do we take it?
What's worse, a mural of the set-piece coach or Kyle Walker's play acting? Because to me, they're in a very, very similar bracket.
Yeah, but if you spent £1 billion, as Chelsea have done, it's hard to then be like, oh, we're the fucking little underdogs. It's like, well, what about that £1 billion you spent on players?
With an 85 million top-up?
I think that's light, man.
Possibly.
I think it's £100 million.
Really?
Oh, Ollie. Hello and welcome along to Not Another Sports Pod with myself, David, and Mr. Oliver Wilson, and it is Not Another Sports Pod, episode number 25, I believe, Mr. Wilson, recording rarely on a Sunday evening. So I'm been told, Ollie, I'm quite a loud talker, so I've just brought it down a little bit out of courtesy to my neighbours. But that's what I'm...
Is this, I was going to say, is this fear of the London new build paper-thin walls that go up left, right and centre around the capital suddenly
I'll have you know,
encroaching your voice on the neighbours?
First and foremost, Mr. Wilson, I'll have you know I live in an old Georgian building which has beautifully been sliced and diced into 5 flats, such as the economic world we live in. I always think if you're going to live in London, it's an old city, live in an old building. Like, if you move to Singapore, then yeah, live in a new building. It's a new, move to America, yeah, it's a new country, live in a new building. But if you can live in an old country, live in an old building. If you possibly can, if it allows. Mr. Wilson also caught my attention that a couple of years ago, maybe more, about 4 years ago, when even less or fewer, whichever Wilson wants here, listeners were on board to our podcast, Ollie regaled us with a Christmas carol or a Christmas poem that he had come up with himself. So, by the way, I'm not going to put you on the spot now, Ollie, but I am for NASP 26, Not Another Sports Pod 26, which I believe we'll record on Monday the 23rd of December. So just to give a little bit of pressure, and in keeping with tradition, listeners can expect a nice Christmas poem, which Ollie's probably run through Chat GPT, such as The Times. But you definitely didn't back in the day. I think it might have been 2020 even, mate, when he gave us that.
Yeah, that was was that like some sort of Libertadores themed Christmas carol?
Exactly that. Exactly.
Jeez, yeah, I do remember doing that. That is a piece of audio that needs to be hidden away for a very, very long period of time. And
when this gets big,
I need that.
They'll be dipping into the archives.
I need that next to the Ark in that big warehouse where Indiana Jones put the Ark of the Covenant. I just need it stored like right at the very back there. But I could do next week, a little year in review of
Mate, I'll leave it up
NASP.
I will leave it up to your creative genius, and I know I'm in safe hands. Ollie, colossal amount to get through. I want to talk Premier League. I want to talk Fury Usyk. I want to talk about darts. Is darts a sport? I want to talk... Well, Ollie Wilson wants to talk about numerous things in the golfing world. And, of course, I want to talk Premier League weekend. But if you don't mind, Mr. Wilson, and if our listeners will just bear with me, I would like to begin with the World Cup being awarded to Saudi Arabia in 2034, because this is a topic quite close to my heart. Because...
In that you are a former resident of Saudi Arabia?
And I was very young, but I was young when I lived there, but it was also, 2 of the most formative years of your life between the ages of like 6 and 8, and I have very strong memories there. So I just wanted to very, very quickly just give my thoughts on the World Cup and it being awarded to Saudi Arabia in 2034. Firstly, a 60-second history of the country, Ollie, because I feel like this is contextually very important when you talk about football and Saudi Arabia and what they're trying to achieve. Saudi Arabia as a country is around about 100 years old, okay? In the 1930s, they discovered oil. They discovered a shitload of oil. And Saudi Arabia became very, very rich. It's a conservative and Islamic state. It's a deeply religious country. And they have a sovereign wealth fund, which makes them one of the richest countries in the world. What's happened to Saudi Arabia in the last few years is essentially... under the very intelligent and pragmatic leadership of MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, he's realised that the oil will not last forever. It might last another 50 years. It might last another 150 years, Ollie. But he's realised that the world is in some part trying to move away from oil. And he's realised he needs to diversify the economy. So that's half the reason why Saudi Arabia have become involved in sport, because Saudi Arabia needs to create new economy. They cannot rely on oil forever. They need to become integrated into the rest of the world. They need to create jobs. They've got a massively growing population. 35 million people live there. It's the biggest country by miles in all the Gulf states. It's a very young population. So the the Crown Prince, he wants to create jobs, he wants to create opportunity, and he wants to bring Saudi Arabia onto the world global stage. So that is why Saudi Arabia want to host the 2034 World Cup. That's why they are. That's not necessarily why they are hosting it, but that's why they wanted to host it. Now, it's okay. So they are hosting the 2034 World Cup. What's wrong with that? Well, if we just park the human rights issue for a moment, what's wrong with it is that they were awarded the 2034 World Cup with no other competing votes. They were also, FIFA have a system, and the system, Ollie, marks every World Cup bid out of 5. And Saudi Arabia got a 4.2, which is the highest ever point system score that has been awarded for any World Cup bid in the 100-year history of the event, or since FIFA introduced its point system at the very least. So Saudi Arabia have been given a 4.2 out of 5, which they're very, very proud of, I understand. Now, Saudi Arabia have not built all the stadiums they need to build. Most of the stadiums that they pitch to FIFA are just in the design phase and just images on a screen. So they've somehow got a 4.2 rating, despite the fact that half these stadiums don't exist. I mean, Germany didn't get a higher rating than that. The US didn't get a higher rating than that, despite the fact that all those stadiums already exist. So that's something. I think that kind of brings us to where we are. One other thing I'd say is that in the kind of vote, and it wasn't a vote, it was an acclamation of all the countries giving Saudi Arabia the World Cup, Norway were the only country to abstain. And while I will commend Norway in some ways for having the bravery to take an opposing view, I'll also say it's easier to take an opposing view when you're a country as rich as Norway and you've got fuck you money, right? Like, it's easier to say no to stuff and to hold a moral centre when you've got that money. So that brings us to Saudi Arabia in the present day. It is also worth noting that Saudi Arabia does have a connection with football, as in they've qualified for World Cups in the past. As I say, there's 35 million people that live in the country. This is different in that way to Qatar hosting the World Cup. Saudi Arabia actually do have a connection to sport, as we've seen them get involved with football and tennis and golf and all the rest. So I hope no one's turned off in the opening 3-4 minutes of that Windsor monologue. I just wanted to give you a bit of contextual reasoning for why this has happened and what it might mean. What do you think, Ollie? What was your first reaction when you heard, or you already knew, that Saudi Arabia were given the 2034 World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, I think we already knew the musings of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia were going to be given it because they, as you say, were running unopposed, which makes it very easy to win a bidding war if you're the only one. I mean, it'd be very easy for anybody to win any one-sided election. I didn't necessarily enjoy the kind of carpet statements that came out from so many FAs saying, well, we've actually looked into it and analysed the whole process and the way this has worked, and we've decided that we are going to back them. It's like, well, everybody had a very similar statement about the reason why they were backing Saudi Arabia, which makes me think that either everybody is completely on the same page or everybody is towing the party line very nicely indeed. The point about the stadiums is very interesting because there may be people that don't understand the idea of like the concept design of the stadium and then what actually may end up looking like. And if you have been on any of the websites that have posted the concept pictures from the bid for Saudi Arabia's 2034 World Cup, somebody described it as, these all look like fucking great Halo multiplayer levels. Because that's what they look like right now. They're like very bright, very futuristic looking. They all have this one concept around them. So one looks like it's built out of wood in a forest. One looks like it's built out of glass in this kind of techno-y area. And I know Saudi Arabia has many of these massively ambitious building projects taking place at the moment, and they all in design look absolutely incredible. Design matching reality is a very different thing. That's why you have a concept car, like Jaguar have brought out a concept car. That isn't the car that people are going to be buying for the road in the next few years. That is the Jaguar concept that they think this sums up what we're trying to move towards, this very funky, cool idea. But actually, it's probably going to look something more realistic that you can actually drive on the road and most people can eventually be able to afford, or at least people who can afford a Jaguar will be able to afford it. So getting carried away with, oh, these stadiums look amazing in concept, let's wait till the design process. And look, I mean, I grew up on World Cup 94 as one of my earliest memories. Saudi Arabia in that World Cup, they scored one of the goals of the World Cup as well. So, as you say, it's a touch better than maybe Qatar and their World Cup bid. It just still, I guess it's easy to say that it doesn't necessarily sit right at times. That would be the one thing.
What's your main problem
I'd
with
say
it? Is it the human rights thing, Ollie, or is the fact they've won it unopposed, or is it the overall sports washing?
I think it's an amalgamation of all of it. It's the sports washing idea. It's the fact that we're moving away from great sporting principles to tailor sporting events for the financial clout that comes with it, because sports need money. Sports want to continue growing, and the money keeps on flowing in this way. I mean, I've made many kind of jokey remarks about that picture of, obviously, from the Russian World Cup with Putin on one side, Infantino in the middle, and the King of Saudi Arabia on the other. And it's like, you say about Infantino, just give him the big dark chair. Like, let's go full, that's almost like something out of a US propaganda movie, starring Harrison Ford, The Patriot or something like that. And that would be the evil scene that would be sat in front of them. But aesthetics is very much a thing. And it all just seems a bit unsettling, so to speak, that we're moving away from, I guess, sporting traditions. And if you want to talk about World Cup bids, you're talking about fair World Cup bids that has been a source of controversy for years now, particularly obviously with Qatar being handed the World Cup and all the backhanders that came out through the great investigative journalism that basically took down FIFA before Infantino then became the head of it. And Sepp Blatter's regime came to an end, with the likes of Jack Warner and others facing repercussions for all the extra money that had been slid across the table towards them. But then if you have someone like Saudi Arabia, say, running unopposed, and everybody just goes, oh, no, let them have it, every right-minded cynic is going to go, well, there's a few question marks around it,
I think that it is a World Cup. I think you're right to mention football tradition, but how do you expect new countries to get tradition if they don't have the opportunity, right? So that's the kind of decent counter there. But I do think the fact that they ran unopposed and they got the highest score ever from a World Cup proposal given to them by FIFA is unsettling. It's just a bit unsettling, I think, is the spot on there.
I think the other thing is the weird comments that have come out from people that you wouldn't necessarily consider being associated with Saudi Arabian football. And maybe there are links that we don't know about or whatever. But I mean, I sent you a message of Rio Ferdinand coming out on social media and saying, congratulations to all of my footballing friends out in Saudi Arabia. I know you've been working so hard for this. And it feels like a pre-written statement as opposed to a genuine... Like, if I'd rather Rio Ferdinand, if he really cared, had gone, fucking awesome, Saudi Arabia have got the World Cup, have a blast hosting it. Not, congratulations to all of my friends and colleagues who work so hard and diligently in Saudi Arabia to bring this World Cup. I mean, it just sounds like a pre-written PR statement, which then, again, it just raises eyebrows on an aesthetic and on a kind of a feel of, well, is this just people being given money to do this, to promote this, like they're an influencer on Instagram or something like that, which again, a World Cup doesn't need. It doesn't necessarily need pre-written propaganda statements from faces because it's a freaking World Cup. It's the peak of international football.
If podcasts still exist in 2034 and neither of us have been hit by a car or had a microphone dropped on our heads or whatever and we're still standing, and Saudi Arabia offered to sponsor not another sports pod, do we take it?
I'd still want the ability to say what I would like to say. And even now I feel like probably there are elements that I can't because, I want to work for a World Cup broadcast at some point. I don't want to cancel myself out of that. I'd like to work on the Saudi Pro League because it's something that, and I don't want to be out there going, well, this is disastrous or anything like that. I'm not saying I necessarily think that, but there are limits to what you can and can't say even on a podcast. So if money came into NASP, but it restricted what we could talk about, I don't think I'd take it. No, I'll be like, it's all right. Give me the commentary job and I'll toe the party line.
I think I'm with you, Ollie. I think it's when the sponsorship deals do come flooding in for the pod, I'm going to push hard to resist for as long as possible. But then when the floodgates have opened, I'll be guzzling Huel in Riyadh. And then it's just then I give you everyone permission to switch off from the pod because we've made it by then. Right, let's
Huel and Piff are the two. That
another thing that made me really sad about the World Cup this week, Ollie, is that the 20 this kind of went under the radar, to be honest. The 2030 World Cup will essentially be held in Spain and Portugal and a bit in Morocco, but Because it's the centenary, the first World Cup was held in 1930 in Uruguay. Paraguay, Argentina, and Uruguay all been given one game each at the start of the tournament. Ollie's shaking his head. I mean, for me, Ollie, the great sadness here is that they didn't find a way to play the 2030 World Cup final in Uruguay, in Montevideo, at the Estadio Centenario. Because the 100-year anniversary of the World Cup, it is a once-in-a-100-year chance to bring it back to its roots. Uruguay... Fucking CONMEBOL in Uruguay, they made the World Cup. Like, that happened. It would have come, of course, it would have happened in some other form had they not done so. But they did do that, and they deserve credit for that. And the 2030 World Cup final should have been held in Montevideo, Uruguay. You've got fucking 6 years to make it happen, figure out the logistics. Uruguay's like a relatively rich country. They've got a nice big stadium. You could have done it. So that really disappoints me, to be honest. It's being held in Madrid.
There's not enough sponsors boxes in the Centenario, though. I don't think the facilities. It'd be more likely to be in the Monumental at the moment than anywhere else down in South America because it's so recently renovated like that. Now, my thing would be if we're talking about Saudi Arabia running unopposed. And huge if, not saying there was, but if it was like a nobody runs against Saudi Arabia, somebody should have said, if you're running unopposed Saudi Arabia, how about you help out the 2030 World Cup and donate some money to renovate some of those stadiums so that we could have had a World Cup down in South America, not completely in Uruguay if there isn't the facilities and the structure, both with stadiums and the infrastructure to host it, but in that part of the world, just across La Plata and go obviously into Argentina as well.
So Uruguay's a tiny country for those kind of wondering, and you've probably only got one stadium really in Montevideo that could hold a World Cup, World Cup game. But if you go to Argentina, now listen, Argentina are broke and it would be very difficult to do, but there would have been a way because you've got 6 or 7 grounds with a bit of modernisation that could have done the job.
And that would have been a better World Cup rather than having these insane ideas of we're going to have the first game in Uruguay. Like, it's a free hit, that group stage, for whichever team gets the bad luck of having to have their first match day ones in Uruguay, and then you're making a 15-hour journey back up to Central Europe to then go and play your second game in Portugal or Morocco or wherever. I mean, it's just... People were slagging off the idea of England having to fly like 4 hours across the Ukraine to be able to go and play like their third group game or something like that, and saying it's an absolute joke. They should have stayed in London and done that. What is going on if we've got it literally on the other side of the planet, the World Cup being broken up? And I'm all for teams hosting it as much as possible. Trump's World Cup, him allowing Canada and Mexico to get involved as well is really sweet.
We discussed it before Trump taking the first pen at the World Cup. If that doesn't
definitely,
happen,
and hijacking the whole thing.
Just finally wrapping up on the World Cup stuff, it's interesting when you say Saudi Arabia running unopposed, because you cannot have back-to-back World Cups in the same confederation, right? And what's interesting about the 2030 World Cup is because South America are holding matches, albeit only 3, and because Morocco is holding a couple of matches, Africa and South America were therefore organically excluded from challenging for the 2034 World Cup. So you'd already taken them out of the equation, which I think is quite interesting how that played out. Anyway, you won't hear me. I love my time in Saudi, Ollie. I'm available to work for any Saudi-related sporting events, and same for Mr. Wilson. So scrap everything. No, but to be fair,
we're wearing Saudi green here, Dave. We're both wearing Saudi green tops. I mean, we are definitely on board. That's for sure. We're on brand.
Whichever religion you need me to convert to. Right, let's talk Premier League. You know what's annoyed me recently? There seems to be this obsession around Chelsea Football Club that they're not in the title race. We're not in the title race. It's too early. We're not in the title race. The fans don't want to hear it. The players say we're not in the title race. Enzo Maresca, we're not in the title race. One look at the Premier League table, they are in the title race. They're very much in the title race. They're 2 points off the top of the table. Liverpool have got a game in hand, obviously. What benefit, Ollie, apart from the obvious they don't want to put too much pressure on themselves, is it not like, fuck it, one life? You're in the fucking title race. Like, just say you this kind of obsession with we're not in the title race. You know where I think it comes from? Everyone's scared now of being labelled a bottler, because a bottler is just this weird adjective that's used for whenever anyone doesn't win something and we're ahead at any stage, instead of actually delving into why something happened and why someone dropped points or lost a football match or whatever. They're just a bottler. Whereas it's actually like way more complex than that, and it's really lazy journalism to call people bottlers. Anyway, Chelsea, are they going to win the Premier League?
I don't think they are. But I completely understand why you dampen down the idea of being in a title race, because lower expectations makes life easy for everybody. This is how I've worked so much of my life, Dave. I mean, this was my go-to on dating.
I wouldn't say that,
getting to know
just got
people.
engaged at least.
No, but I set the bar low. First date was always a coffee. I'm not going big. We're not starting with a extravaganza of theatre tickets and dinner or anything like that. It's set the bar low, and then if you continue to achieve up, that is a gradual, progressive increase in quality. If you're starting out a small business, you don't want that big year on the first year, and then
but if you spent £1 billion,
less growth
as Chelsea have done, it's hard to then be like, oh, we're the fucking little underdogs. It's like, well, what about that £1 billion you spent on players?
Yeah, but we're in a rebuilding phase because we brought so many people in. We're trying to piece it all together. We bought all the bricks, but we're still trying to get the house sorted and built up. No, and I think as well, though, never underestimate pressure in sport, just in general. That's why they don't pay amateurs in golf, even if an amateur wins a PGA Tour event. So you can be an amateur on the PGA Tour, get an invite into a competition or take one of the amateur spots in a competition. And if you win that competition, you do not get any of the prize money whatsoever. The prize money goes down to the second place guy. You get the credibility of winning, and obviously you turn professional at that point, but you don't get the money because the pressure on you as an amateur is never as much as the pressure on somebody that it is their job, it's their living, they're a professional. And that putt is worth 1.5 million as opposed to 500,000 US dollars or something like that. And that pressure is the same as being in a Premier League title race and stepping up to take a penalty or a set piece or in a key moment. Having that ability, if you think going through one-on-one with a goalkeeper that this could be a season-defining moment, and that goes into the player's head, they recognize that in that moment, it's a huge change in how tense they get, how they react in that moment, compared to if it's, oh, I'm through. Bloody hell, this is great. Slot it away. 2-0. Jobs are good. And, oh, Christ, we're at the top of the table now ahead of Liverpool. And it's harder and harder to dampen down the idea of being in a title race or not, the closer and closer you get to the top of the table at the end of the day. And there's only so long that you can keep saying it until it becomes completely ludicrous to say. But at this point, if I'm Maresca, I keep at it and just say, no, Liverpool got this game in hand. We're suddenly going to be easily 5 points off. It's not a title race. We're not there yet. Maybe next year. Because that means that your players can continue to play with the freedom, express themselves without that pressure. And if you can take that pressure off them in any way, it's going to lead to far better results, better confidence, and a better atmosphere around a group. There's nothing worse than being the favourites going into a big tournament of anything. Because there's immediately that idea of your expectation level is win or go home.
One reason I think they might last the course, Ollie, is the fact that they're in the Conference League. So the Conference League, they're just using a B-side. So they're essentially only playing the Premier League now. Obviously, the FA Cup kicks in January. They're out the League Cup, aren't they, I think? So the Premier League is everything now for Chelsea. Their B-side in the Conference League has already won 5 from 5. They should, realistically, Enzo Maresca shouldn't have to play his first-choice side till the semi-finals, really. So we're talking sort of springtime. So they're in a rare position, really, where they can fight for the title and only focus on the Premier League. So that's why I think they might last the course. Do I think they'll win it? Probably not, because I don't think you can win a Premier League with that goalkeeper. And I'm not sure about their centre-backs either. I don't think... I think defensively, they'll be found wanted. But, I mean, they're banging the title race, absolutely. And Pep Guardiola, after losing the Manchester derby, which I do want to talk about because I thought it was a really... Well, it was a fascinating end to the game. This is what he said, Ollie. I don't know whether you've seen his quotes. I'll just read them out now. When he was interviewed by Match of the Day after the game, he said, "I'm not good enough. I'm the boss. I'm the manager. I have to find solutions, and so far I haven't. That's the reality. Not much else to say. No defence. They were persistent. We've not lost 8 games in 2 seasons. I can't defend that." I mean, saying I'm not good enough, it's pretty punchy.
This is all just Pep's like, this limits me having to have any actual inquisition into what's gone wrong if I just... He does this all the time. He puts everything on himself as a really good deflecting tactic, but it becomes a bit martyry when things... On the rare occasion that things are going wrong with Man City, it becomes this like, oh no, I'm so bad. No, it's all on me. It's me. I'm just doing it. Like, it's so irritating because it also means that BBC interview is over like that. And the same with a Sky one or anything, because you are just like, right, well, no, I'm saying it's all me. There's no point you asking any other questions because this is the answer that you're getting. And it's him just being able to escape away. It's an ability to handle the media in the way that he wants it handled without putting any pressure on his players and any real criticism on his players and the way they're going out and performing. And it's intelligent, it's smart from a managerial point of view of protecting your players, keeping it in-house, those sorts of discussions. But it does restrict the idea that the media is meant to be the conduit between the fans and the club and is meant to set managers, footballers to task when things aren't going how they should be necessarily in world football. And that's what Pep's doing.
The end of the game, Ollie. Let's talk about Ahmed Diallo's winning goal. Because it's an incredible goal.
Great.
And Ollie and I were chatting on WhatsApp basically as the goal went in. And at first it was like, that's an incredible goal. But Gvardiol should have kept it out. When you look at the second replay and the third replay, should have kept it out. The first touch is astonishing, by the way. Because so many players, I think, wouldn't be able to stretch and control the ball in that manner. I thought it was amazing. And he's still got so much to do. The angle's so tight. So it's an amazing goal to win a Manchester derby. But Gvardiol should stop that going in.
Yeah, but except for the fact that you've got a defender also who's going the wrong way. So if his momentum his body with momentum touches the ball, he's knocking it over the line anyway. So he's trying to orchestrate his feet against his body weight's momentum to try and get it back. So I understand why he hasn't actually made that clearance. And as you say, the first touch is great. I actually think the second touch as well there's no messing around. There's no taking a pause. It's up over the keeper and first time slots it from a very acute angle past the defender as well. It's a great piece of control and finishing. It's just a shame it happened in such a terrible game that as I was watching it, I was like, I kept asking myself, why should I care that much about this Manchester derby? Because obviously it's had a big billing going up this week. We were denied obviously the Merseyside derby a week ago because the weather called it off, etc. But why do I care about this Manchester derby right now, right? Because Amarin's come in, he's not riding a wave of positivity. He's already lost a game. This isn't the immediate turnaround that United fans were hoping for. It's clear signs that there's going to be various shake-ups if Amarin is going to be able to get this United side to succeed. And it's a City side that have won 1 in 10 games now, I think it is, or something like that. I mean, it's a disastrous run for Manchester City.
They've lost 8 in 11, mate. They've won 1 in 11 now. Lost 8 of their last 11. I mean, you would have got 10,000 to 1 on that, 50,000 to 1. Like, bookies wouldn't have even given you a prize.
So this is two teams that aren't in the title race, fighting over bragging rights for a town that personally, as a football fan, like, has no real affinity to me, the city of Manchester. It doesn't matter who's got bragging rights, blue or red. I get, obviously, Sky build it up because local rights are important to local fans. It should be. But I was sat there thinking, I don't care enough about this to watch this bad a game of football. And it really was a huge letdown. The quality didn't match the billing at all. And I don't know whether
it was a great end, but it was a crap game basically. And it was two sides that had zero identity or confidence. It was a real wet Manchester derby. I agree with you.
Damp squib completely. There was no spark, the number of times that you looked and thought, give it now, and there'd be an extra touch or a pause from both sides. And that's definitely not what we're used to seeing from Manchester City, because I think you're right with the confidence. There just isn't that confidence there to play 1-2 touch passing.
Ollie, there isn't. Whatever Guardiola's philosophy is, the core of it is winning the ball back very, very quickly after you've lost it. That kind of whatever he's written, there's books and articles about it, like the 5 to 7 seconds after losing the ball is the most imperative. That's when you win it back. And Manchester City used to be just obsessed. All the players were individually and collectively obsessed with winning it back as soon as they lost it. And they're not now. They lose it and it's like, okay, I guess Man United will have the ball for a bit. And, psychological, are they knackered? I don't know why that's changed, but it has. And I think when the core element of your footballing philosophy is fucked up, that's why Pep looks so lost and he doesn't have any answers, because his entire philosophy was on obviously being at the best clubs in the world, and 2, creating this system where you win the ball back within 5 to 7 seconds of losing it. And when that's gone, if your entire footballing philosophy is pulled out from underneath you, I don't really know what you do from here. You can't be like, hit the big man, line it.
But
I
don't know if it's him and the fact that he's now, as a manager, not able to motivate this side to play that way off the ball suddenly, or if it's just the fact that the players aren't in that headspace to be able to do it, either physically, mentally, whatever. But it's quite a damning indictment suddenly if to drop off a cliff this much. I think it's ludicrous people still saying, oh, Pep might be in trouble here with his job. Oh, Guardiola could be gone. He's not. They are no City director in their right mind is going to go, oh, should we change the manager? You're allowed a down year at some point after the success you've had with Manchester City, and it takes that. And maybe that's all it will take. It will take this year to kind of shake a few people up and go, oh, geez, either we need to find a permanent replacement for Kevin De Bruyne if the injuries are still going to be too problematic and he's not coming back in the right way. We need to find an actual piece of depth in case we lose Rodri for another season.
They got rid of Alvarez, mate. That was crazy. That was great, getting rid of Julian Alvarez. Like, how arrogant are you? And I know he wanted to leave because he wanted to play all the time. But had he stuck around at City this season, he would have played every game. Do you know what I mean? Because the injuries they've got and because of the problems they've had. And they wouldn't, Alvarez might have scored a couple of goals that would have made the last 11 games look a lot different. So I thought that was crazy when they let him go. I know they got good money for him, etc., etc. He wanted to leave, but he had a contract. You could have kept him there for another year.
And then you have the most embarrassing piece of play acting in the Premier League that I've seen in a long period of time falls on City's shoulders. I mean, Kyle Walker couldn't look like more of an absolute muppet.
There's cameras everywhere, Carl. There's fucking cameras everywhere, mate. People are going to see that. So that you can't dive. Yeah.
And I loved Harry Maguire immediately coming in and being like, no, pick yourself up, mate. You're better than this. And all the City players like, hey, whoa. He's obviously been done in the face. It's like, he's obviously not. Like, you don't need it in slow-mo to see the delay of Højlund putting his head in with Walker at the same time and Walker having that moment's pause of, oh, like platoon-esque. It was pathetic. And to me, it just summed up a lot of that game at that point of just, is this what it's come down to? Is this what the Manchester derby, supposedly two of the titans of English football, has come down to tonight? We're looking at this.
Football can change so quickly though, Ollie, and I think you're absolutely right in that maybe this season is just a kind of weird free hit from now on for Guardiola. Let's say they finish 6th. Like, is it the end of the empire? Is it the end of the world for them? Maybe not, there's a very strong possibility that they squeeze through the Champions League and finish, 22nd, 23rd in that group. It's basically impossible to not qualify at this stage in the Champions League. And then, that playoff round's in February. Maybe they've signed 3 players in January. Maybe Pep's taken them away for a week. Things could look pretty different. I'm not dancing on anyone's grave because Pep could easily sort of steal a 4th place in an FA Cup and you'd be like, Jesus, that was a pretty good season in the end, to be honest, Pep, where you were. It's another trophy in the bank, Champions League football next year, transition year. So, yeah. Arsenal, Ollie. They've got a mural of their set-piece coach outside the Emirates, Nicolas Jova. A mural.
What's
graffiti
worse?
on
What's
the
worse?
wall outside the Emirates of your set-piece coach. I mean, the game is well and truly gone. I mean, they haven't even won.
What's worse, a mural of the set-piece coach or Kyle Walker's play acting? Because to me, they're in a very, very similar bracket of
no redemption to it. It's just pathetic. Whereas the mural's like, okay, you haven't won anything, but you've got a mural, so there's some comedic edge to that. Like, we're laughing at you, laughing at us, laughing at you. Like, there's a play within a play with that I think. And like, they are fucking good at set pieces.
You think it's an ironic mural that's been done?
Yeah.
Somebody's gone there and painted it up and been like, yeah, look, this is a good laugh, isn't it? No, the trouble is that there are people that are also going to buy into this and be like, look at this icon of set piece creativity for 13 games in a season.
Jonathan Wilson's already writing the book on him, like it's a bestseller soon. If they actually win anything, it's always the same. Like, if you don't win stuff, you look stupid. But if Arsenal won something, then you could build a statue for Nicolas Jova and it would sort of somehow be okay, maybe next to Thierry Henry. Arsenal need a striker, Ollie. We discussed this on the pod before, that it's quite unfashionable to have a striker. And something cropped up in one of my football WhatsApp groups that I thought was really interesting. Arsenal need a striker. Alexander Isak is a striker who scores a lot of Premier League goals. And Newcastle need to sell to balance the books. That's well documented. Isak's their most valuable player, I think. Okay, so my next question is, bearing in mind Dominic Solanke was purchased by Tottenham for a deal up to £65 million, how much do you think Alexander Isak is worth? And I'm going to let you answer it, then I'm going to tell you the stats of how many Premier League goals they've scored compared to games. because there's some contrast between that. Dominic Solanke, I think it was initial 50 million, and then rising to 65. So Alexander Isak, who's 25 years old, Dominic Solanke is 27. What do you think Isak's market rate is?
I mean, obviously as well with an English club selling to an English club, it just jacks up the price even more to internal Premier League transfers. So you're probably looking at 65 million base with an 85 million top up.
I think that's light, man.
Possibly.
I think it's £100 million.
Really? Oh,
Ollie.
Come on, Dave. We can't just be.
Can I just show my
I know
work?
you lived in Saudi Arabia. Like, I know you're a piff baby at the end of the day. That's what
Ollie.
you are. So money means nothing to this man. But
Ollie, Dominic Solanke has played 147 Premier League games, right? He scored 34 Premier League goals. He went for 50 million, rising to 65. Alexander Isak has played 66 Premier League games, and he's scored 38 Premier League goals. He is at least twice as good as Dominic Solanke. And I mean that. So if Solanke goes for 50, I'm sorry, Alexander Isak is a £100 million footballer. And Arsenal need to go out in January, and they need to make Newcastle an offer they cannot refuse. Pay 120 million for him. I mean that. Then you've got a striker for the next 5 years. And you've got a guarantee of Premier League goals. Because Alexander Isak is that, Ollie. He's a guarantee of Premier League goals.
But we're talking about pressure earlier. And there's a huge difference, again, from playing in a Newcastle side that the expectation is to find European football and being the front man that is going to change things for Arsenal and make them a title-winning force once again. And I'm not saying that Isak can't handle that weight of expectation. I'm just saying that is a very different weight of expectation to playing as the front man at Newcastle United. And
so do you think Arsenal are crazy if Arsenal spent 100 million in January?
I think that's it's just way too much in general. But that's cynical. Like, I'm a 85-year-old man in a 36-year-old's body here, Dave. So I think anybody being sold for 100 million is borderline.
Well, it rarely works as well.
Point.
I mean, £100 million players historically,
And you're always put up against your value. That's the other thing. Of anybody that ends up being a record-breaking transfer or anything, there are very few that live up to the value.
Maybe 80 and throw Kai Havertz the other way. Something like that.
I mean, that would actually make more sense, to be honest. Like, Newcastle could probably do with a little bit more excitement that can play across the front. Yeah. And then, but it's not a bad shout. There aren't many names that spring off the board in terms of great out-and-out centre forwards that you could go and find. I mean, I was chatting with an Arsenal fan over the weekend. I said, if you'd just gone and got Osimhen, that would have been so good for you.
I think Osimhen's a better footballer than Alexander Isak. I think Osimhen's got more to his game. But
you know what the response was, yeah, but we've fallen short with buying players from foreign leagues before. I was like, oh, you know when you want to bang your head against a wall and you're just like, I'm not gonna have this discussion. Like, fair enough, he's at Galatasaray now, he's made the wrong move, etc. But we're just not gonna have that discussion because he is superb and would flourish as an out-and-out centre forward for any team. If you want a goal scorer, he's the guy that would be able to finish for you with the number of chances that Arsenal create. And if you want to go and get fleeced in a transfer market this winter, then be ahead. Go ahead.
I agree 100 million for Isak is quite a lot of money, but I honestly think it would be the missing piece of the puzzle for Mr. Arteta. And I think he's at a point now where he's just got to say fuck it, and assuming the actual money's there, he's got to say fuck it.
It could be. He's not the missing piece. He could be the missing piece. And that's the reason why you can't afford to go and pay 100 million for somebody that might be.
Well, they did that for Declan Rice. I mean, Declan Rice arrived, they still haven't won anything.
No, but Declan Rice was... It's easier to be that holding midfielder guy than it is to be a centre-forward, in my opinion. I think that translates much easier because you're the ball winner at the end of the day and your ability to distribute is still going to be the same. The difference with being the front man is like being the front man of a rock and roll band, isn't it? Like being a centre forward at a Premier League football side. Being the DM is like being the bass player. Just sit there, play that rhythm, keep it going. Yeah, keep with the drum beat. But the front man's got to be the front man. And so if you change front men, people notice a lot and they want immediate results.
People come for the football chat. They stay for the analogies on Not Another Sports Pod. I'm 100% convinced about it. Talk a little bit about sports broadcasting because I don't know how much you want to talk about CBS's coverage. I think it annoys you more than it annoys me, Ollie. But I also wanted to say that apparently Kelly Cates is just about to get the match of the day job. Someone just messaged me that, so could be a bit of breaking news there, and not another sports pod, which we discussed this a few weeks back. Feel free to tune in. Feel free to scroll back and listen to that. But I thought Kelly Cates would be a great choice, so I hope she does get it. Talk to me about CBS, Ollie. What do you like about it? What do you appreciate that it's to an American audience? And educate people that don't know. CBS is, tell people exactly what it is and why it exists.
So CBS have got the Champions League rights at the moment in the US, and they have a pretty big panel. Kate Abdo, former Sky Sports, has gone out to the US, made a name for herself, and now anchors the CBS Sports, CBS Champions League football nights. And they have Jamie Carragher, Micah Richards, and Thierry Henry in studio. Alessandro Del Piero comes in from time to time as well for the big Italian nights, particularly obviously when Milan played Liverpool earlier in the season. And when you hear like Carragher, Omri, Richards, particularly as an English audience, we're used to seeing two of those on a very regular basis, and very much kind of extra characters, shall we say, Carragher and Micah Richards in very different ways. Yeah. And then you've got Thierry Henry that comes in as like the smooth, suave French James Bond kind of pundit as well. He's just very classy, but he's got the underhanded kind of subtle bantery jokes as well. You know, I don't know what I'm saying, but I know exactly what I'm saying. And it works for a US audience wonderfully, because a US audience is, if you've ever watched like American football or NHL or anything like that in the US, there's a lot of like adverts where the ex-players are kind of joking around with each other or like pushing each other around a bit, and oh hey, chuck me the ball, all that, like, and it looks banterful and playful, and they have those kind of jokes on set as well and everything like that. And CBS has taken that and tried to put it into a soccer role, and for a large part it creates a huge amount of clicks and comedic moments for a new football fan to get their teeth into, rather than it just being, let's run through the X's and O's, the stats, the XG, let's overload ourselves with tactics. No, let's just have a laugh, joke about it. They've made lots of comments, though, this year about, like, the French side Brest. And
I don't find this funny, by the way.
They've taken this to, like, a 6-year-old in a playground kind of level. It's not remotely funny.
Mate, I heard, like, I think it was the Athletic podcast the other day, where they're joking about it. And, like, there's a woman on the panel, and they're trying to make jokes about it. It's like, is this funny? Like, if it is, they do it on Lineker's podcast, and every single time it's like, oh, we could talk about Brest, but Micah can't because he's a bit of a tit. And it's like, okay, guys, like, what the fuck? Like, you couldn't say that in an office, I don't think.
Yeah, it's just, and to be honest, I don't even really care about the, like, whether it's acceptable or that kind of thing. To me, it's just not funny. Like, it's really base. It's just base humor. Like, it's like making a poo joke. It's just that kind of base at that point. So they've had that. They had last season, Jamie Carragher was out on the wall in Dortmund and out with the fans before going into the mix zone at the end of the game to do interviews. And Jamie Carragher had a number of pints out there with the German fans during his Champions League game. He gets into the mix zone. He's dragging Jadon Sancho over. He's kind of interrupting other interviews to get in and get his word in. Apparently, behind the scenes, just pissed off a whole load of like the Dortmund press kind of people and all this kind of stuff. But what went out on air was Jamie Carragher, after a few drinks, having a laugh, being banterful, made great clicks for CBS. And again, that's what they're going for, and that's the kind of group that it's being tailored to, this content. And my problem with that was that you're kind of disrespecting what is quite a unique position to be in. Being in one of those mixed zones, getting to talk to players, etc., is very rare. There's a lot of reporters that give their right arm for that chance, and you've basically gone in there pissed as a fart and made a bit of a tit of yourself. And then this week we just had this weird thing where somebody made reference to like Micah Richards having one of those nicotine pouches in his lip. Like Thierry Henry was going on about it, and like whether he's got it or not, that I just don't care about. Like I
don't think we've done much in this podcast to dispel the myth that we're two grumpy old men talking about sport, Ollie. I told the story in the pod that someone recently listened and was like, yeah, you two are like Victor Meldrew. So yeah.
If I was doing commentary and my co-commentator had like if my co-commentator was having a cigarette and we were doing, I wouldn't make a joke about it or something. Like, you maybe make
I'd
a
respect
joke
it.
about like a former club or something like that. Yeah, it'd be great if you had Marcelo Lippi there with the cigar, or it'd be awesome. But yeah, so I just found it very weird that this chat between Richards and I think.
But you're
Del
not
Piero
American,
was there.
mate. It's not built for you. It's not designed for you. It's not broadcast for
No,
you. It's
and
harmless.
it's
No
not-
one
it's not-
died. So, cheer up, Mr. Wilson.
But isn't it just weird to
It's
be like
not for me,
promoting
mate.
the fact that somebody's doing snooze
It's not for me, like, because I
on
just
air?
don't find it that funny. It doesn't offend me.
But isn't it not bad? It's not good for kids, is it? Like, aren't you kind of going down this route for the game, but then you're advertising like nicotine pouches
then, I mean,
towards
mate,
like under 18? I don't
what
know.
about
I
the
don't
gambling
know. It's
adverts
just,
and the fast food adverts and the,
yeah.
isn't Coca-Cola sponsors FIFA, whatever the fuck it is. I don't know. Game's gone. Right.
So that's my work with Saudi Arabia, FIFA, and CBS.
No,
down
but
the
I actually
drain.
think,
Beautiful.
to be fair to you, Ollie, and hopefully we do on Not Another Sports World, we try and present things in a very balanced way. And I do think as well, these days where everyone's got a platform, I mean, I've seen some people in broadcasting, Ollie, write some insane stuff on Twitter that I think, how can you ever work again if you write that? And yet there they are, like, popping up in the offices and stuff. And it's like, I don't know, like, I'm not, yeah, so some people write some bonkers stuff. Goes out there. So I think we've been relatively...
I wasn't against the idea initially of it being less stuffy. I like the idea of a less stuffy broadcast for sure. I personally go with, if you're going to have that, have a show like Soccer AM. Like, have your show that is that.
Yeah, but Soccer AM... but what do you mean by that, Ollie? Because Soccer AM's been dragged through the mud quite a lot recently because a lot of the clips have not
getting
aged
pasted
well, I think it's fair to say.
No, but I would have like a dedicated show that is the banter show, and then you have, when you're looking at a game and you're watching a game on a big Champions League night, the pinnacle of European club football, maybe have a bit of analysis rather than breast jokes for 20 minutes
breast jokes have got
for
to
a
go.
clip. That's all I think.
More than reasonable. Oh God, I almost don't want to get onto the first non-sport feature because it's not going to help our cause in me being grumpy. But is darts a sport? Is what I've got written down ahead of the Ali Pali. Ahead of the event at Ali Pali, which starts tomorrow, I believe. Is it Monday the 16th, or does it start today? Or was it Monday the 16th?
Well, Dart Championships is tonight. It was this weekend.
It starts
wasn't it?
today, yeah.
All kicked off.
Yeah. First of all, is it a sport, darts? It's obviously hugely popular, massively gaining popularity, great TV audience, amazing characters, like all of this kind of stuff. I mean, how would you define a sport, Ollie?
Well, it's great banter, isn't it, this one? So it's clearly a sport. If there's good banter in it, Dave, it's got to be a sport these days.
Can you be in terrible physical shape and it still be a sport? So that's all usually my barometer.
I think you can, because a sport, to me, is like a game that becomes professionally competitive, I think.
But then you could say chess is
because
a sport, which is not.
You could argue it's a sport, isn't it? Professional chess is a sport.
It's not a sport.
You were talking about the number of calories that they burn. They probably burn more calories than a darts player up there. I
always think that I think that you've got to be in peak physical condition for it to be called a sport. If you can rock up and not be in good condition and still be one of the best, it ain't a sport.
I think you're confused with a sport and an athlete,
Ollie.
because I don't think you'd say that I don't think anybody would say that a darts player is an athlete.
But are
because
they
athlete
sportsmen?
implies that. But I think you can be a sportsman without the physical
so you can
fitness.
be an overweight sportsman.
Yeah, Neil Ruddock existed, Steve Bruce existed, Gary Pallister existed back in the day. They were not necessarily at peak physical fitness. There were a number of players back in the kind of 90s still, before Wenger had revolutionised the whole kind of nutrition fitness idea around the Premier League. There were so many players that were fairly out of shape and still being able to play and get around. There's a lot further down the leagues at professional football teams that are not in good shape but are able to do a job in various positions. And that you wouldn't say that's an athlete, but you definitely say that's a sportsman because they're playing a sport. And I think darts players, men and women, are sportsmen and women. And I think you've got to say it's a sport. The degree of difficulty. We had the conversation of a hole-in-one or a 147 break. And I think a 147 and a 9-dart finish might be up there with similar difficulty levels. And so if we're putting snooker into the sport bracket, then we're putting darts into the sport bracket without a doubt.
Okay. I mean, I don't agree. I don't think darts is a sport. I think you have to set a clear set of perimeters, and mine are you've got to be in peak physical condition for it to be considered a sport. But let's move on, Ollie. What else? Are you going to take a deep breath ahead of telling us everything that's going on in the golfing world?
I will. It looks like we're getting a deal between the PGA and the Saudi PIF
in the kingdom.
The backers of the great Live Golf League, which of course avid watchers here on NASP. A rumored deal that's going to be $12 billion US. The PIF are going to be buying into the PGA for 6%. So they're taking a minority share in the PGA. Yeah,
and you think $100 million for Usyk's too much?
Yeah, I know. The valuation on the PGA seems to be
we're in the wrong fucking country,
wildly inaccurate.
Like, we need to be in Saudi or the US where there's real money knocking around. Jesus.
Yeah, a few hundred quid for a National League commentary doesn't really cut the mustard when you see that flying about, I have to say. But it's interesting because it's now this joining of the two for an extortionate amount of money. There seems to be a deal in place now between Saudi PIF and the DP World Tour, the European Tour, which looks like that they're going to work kind of reasonably close together in terms of scheduling, allowing the live players to be able to be on the DP World Tour, not face financial fines for not appearing on major DP Tour World events and instead playing live events, etc. That looks like that's in the pipeline as well. So how the PGA and the PIF work together to create this harmonious golf world is yet to be seen, but having financial details being leaked over the last few days shows that we are taking further and further steps to the world of golf getting at least back all together once again, and everybody that went to live laughing their little behinds off going, ha ha ha, we took the money and we were able to come back. Isn't that going to create a lovely piece of rivalry between those players and the guys that stayed loyal to the PGA, which is then going to produce what has been predicted by Bryson DeChambeau and Brooks Koepka as well, apparently. The rumour mill is that there is going to be a Ryder Cup style event between LIV and PGA players. Now, whether this is going to be every single year or whether it's going to be every 2 years like the Ryder Cup. Yeah.
We've got to like something on this podcast, Ollie. Because we're 54 minutes in.
I've decided to work in sport and dedicate my whole working life towards it. But I can't find anything positive to say about any of the sports that I apparently love. Look, I shot an 80 today, so I'm very happy with the golf as a sport in general. That's perfect for me. But the problem is for me is the Ryder Cup, the beauty of it, and that's changing already because of what the US are doing now. But one of the beautiful things about the Ryder Cup is they don't get paid to play in the Ryder Cup. It is you are a European player because you're born in Europe, because you're from Europe, you represent Europe. Same with the US. And until this next one coming up next year at Best Page Black, no one's been paid to play in the Ryder Cup. You obviously get financial rewards from your sponsors, etc., the merchandising, all that, but there is no fee for being part of that team. The US are going to change that in next year, as we've discussed previously on this podcast, which taints it slightly. But as long as Europe still stays strong, I think you still have that essence. And you obviously have the rivalry that's been organic over the years of Europe against the US. And that is decided by something as pure, in the same way international football is so pure, your nationality and where you were born. And obviously that's changing. The number of South Africans in the Scottish rugby team, for instance, it just shows how that can be fiddled and manoeuvred and manipulated as much as you'd like. But it still kind of feels organic. It's a pet peeve of
that mine, Ollie. Because...
What, having non-nationals in national teams? Yeah, because I think
it's a very tricky topic that people don't want to talk about. And I understand why, because it's very layered and it's very difficult. And who are you to tell someone what they truly feel if they've lived between different countries, or maybe their parents from different countries. But I do generally feel that the country of your birth is a decent indicator in terms of which nation you're going to represent. In the sense that, Ollie, we know British people that have lived in Argentina for 10 years, right? And I think some of them have Argentine passports. If one of them turned around to me and said, I'm Argentine, I'd be like, no, you're not, mate. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? You're British. There should be something in sport. It's something that's crept in because people are terrified to challenge it. And I understand why they're terrified, because they don't want to come across incorrectly. But I do think you can say that, your birthplace does dictate some kind of identity.
And it's coming to sport, because leaders of national teams are terrified at losing their job, because the money is pushing up and up in the same way that it's gone up in club level of rugby, football, etc. And people are so scared of losing on the national stage in the same way that teams are so scared of losing 2 games in a row on the club level, that they go, sod it. If we can find this guy and find some ancestry in his background, cool, he can be now Scottish, plays for the Scottish national team. There we go. Boom, jobs are good, and that's a game changer for us. But at least the organic idea of born in Europe, born in the US, that's the Ryder Cup setup. And that's what makes it unique and special and gives it that essence. That's why sport is so good. That's why I love sport, when things are organic and there is a traditional rivalry and it all comes into place and comes to a great crescendo at the right time. And then if you have what is great about the Ryder Cup as well, which is a rare opportunity to play team golf, 2v2, a team against a team. You're not winning a match for your own personal glory. You're winning a match to earn 1 point for your team. It's such a rare feeling and emotional experience that the golfers have discussed. And that's what makes the Ryder Cup so special. So then to try and the same problem with Liv kind of having this team element, to just go, right, we're going to do a Ryder Cup, but it's based on, did you take a load of money from the Saudis or did you stay with the PGA? That doesn't feel right to me as a sports fan. It just doesn't
spectacle,
sit.
I reckon. It
probably is.
The needle and a good spectacle, and you can create like a nice little, the good guys and the bad guys if you want, and there might be a great organic rivalry from it, because there are people pissed off on that PGA Tour that they either weren't offered the money or didn't take the money and decided to stick with the PGA, and then felt that the PGA slung them out and left them out to dry. So they would be pissed off. So there is that rivalry of some sorts. But at the same time, it still feels forced. It feels like a false creation rather than having like, look, country borders, if you really want to get into the existential I'm already
idea
editing what I said earlier, Ollie, because I don't want to get cancelled for,
But yeah, it's not something that I really care about seeing at the moment, in the same way that I don't care about the fact that people think that the WNBA should be getting the love for Caitlin Clark being named Athlete of the Year, when actually...
Talk us through the story, because this woman is an absolute superstar, right? I mean,
Caitlin Clark's created the focus on the WNBA
like never before.
The WNBA is going through a number of years. It's had a couple of big names. Lisa Sparks was one of
women's
them.
Basketball in the US, by the way, for anyone uninitiated.
Yeah. And I think she was like one of the first women that was able to dunk. And then you had a long period of like there just wasn't really much excitement around it. And then Caitlin Clark came out of college basketball this year, went into the WNBA. She was a star in college, had this wonderful rivalry with this LSU player, Angel Reese. Caitlin Clark played at Iowa. I mean, I wouldn't have known anything about any female college basketball player, but I know Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark because of what their rivalry in college and their flare-ups on the court in college, and then obviously both going into the WNBA this year. And all the attention, Caitlin Clark has come in and been an absolute stormer. Rookie of the year, one of the best players in the league this season anyway, has all of the media attention around her. The reason why clubs and franchises in the WNBA are getting chartered flights now is because of the money and attention, because Caitlin Clark came into the WNBA and started absolutely balling out. And so Time Magazine have gone, that's our Athlete of the Year. She's literally changed how that league operates by coming in and continuing to do what she did in college. And it's been incredible. And then there was one of the owners, I think it was, of one of the WNBA teams said that this wasn't right, that it became a race topic very quickly because Caitlin Clark is a white female. But she was also saying that the WNBA should be named as the League of the Year rather than Caitlin Clark getting all the adulation, because there are so many women that came before Caitlin Clark that created this. And I find that very odd when you're giving out an annual award, because surely the point of an annual award, more than anything else, is to give credit to the person that has done the most over those 12 months, not what's happened in 2 decades prior. That's my problem with it, is that we're trying to say that it's about the WNBA. And unfortunately, this Caitlin Clark award is about Caitlin Clark and no one else. And she's the game changer at the end of the day. She's the one that's kind of been the wrecking ball and torn up the script and changed that league's future, arguably.
There's a bit of a familiar theme on this pod, Ollie. We started with Saudi Arabia, so let's end by talking about Usyk and Tyson Fury.
Riyadh season never disappoints, Dave. Riyadh season never disappoints as we have the Barnstormer coming up on December 21st. It's an absolute slobber knocker for you. Tyson Fury against Usyk. Fury Usyk 2 coming up. It's a Christmas present for all fans of action in the squared circle, and you can catch it live on Sky Sports, on DAZN, on pay-per-view, wherever you are watching. I've done a few of these reads in the last few weeks, mate.
The good thing, Ollie, I mean, it is funny how much Saudi have dominated sport.
It's a
now.
great
It's just hilarious. But the good thing is it's on at a nice time, isn't it? 8 o'clock Saturday night, next night. A nice little pre-Christmas present for you, watching a bit of heavyweight boxing. Usyk's the favourite, isn't he?
Yeah, I think so. I think
Bookie's
people are seeing that
favourite,
Tyson Fury's just wavering in that part of the career, and Usyk was really good against Tyson Fury, despite what Frank Warren says last time out. Frank Warren was obviously is the promoter of Tyson Fury and was saying that he felt that Fury came on strong late in the fight, which he did. He won the last round, but Usyk had done enough already to be able to get the job done. Usyk as well is just so likable. You've seen him in the pre-fight camps where he's in the gym just raving to techno in the middle of this boxing ring and dancing around. Obviously he's sparring and taking it seriously, but he seems like he's having an absolute wildly fun time just being the heavyweight
he's
champion
more
of the
likeable
world.
than Tyson Fury, and you feel like there's less weird layers maybe around him.
Doesn't have a brother that pulls out of fights left, right and centre, which like Tommy Fury's just embarrassing the sport of boxing by being a reality star that can't fight and now won't fight and won't step into a ring. And I just think we've had this great time with Tyson Fury, and I don't think it can be underestimated what he did when he took down Wilder when nobody really gave him a chance. And he finished Wilder's career at the end of the day, because Deontay Wilder, since those fights against Fury, has not appeared on the face of the boxing planet really since then. And it's a shame that we'll never see Joshua Fury when both of them were at their best. I think this is the next best fight that you can probably have in the world of boxing, because I think Usyk is. He already is. We already know that he's the absolute real deal. Look, I wouldn't necessarily count out Tyson Fury either, because so many people have come unstuck by his unorthodox style and the unpredictable style that he has in the ring. And if there's one thing you can say about Tyson Fury is that he doesn't tend to have boring fights. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of fists thrown.
He's
and
a lot taller, isn't he, as well?
Big moments in them. Yeah, he's a massive
Tyson
guy.
sort of nearly 6'9" or something crazy. And
he's got these lanky arms.
Even as someone that's like a fair weather boxing fan, that unusual gait and style and the little belly and the arms and the way he sort of moves around is just so fascinating. So, but it's on. How can I watch this, Ollie, legally?
So it's on pay-per-view. So it'll be on Sky Sports pay-per-view. It's on DAZN pay-per-view. I think it might be on TNT Sports pay-per-view as well, because they've all signed deal. Yeah, it's all pay-per-view. Yeah.
Obviously, boxing.
But it might actually be one of the. But it might be one of the big fights that's worth buying. Like, I've been scuppered by some of these pay-per-view fights in the past, and there aren't many that I'll pay the money for.
It's like
this
20
is
quid,
one that I look at and think, yeah, probably £25, I think, something like that.
Nothing,
20,
is it?
25
I mean,
quid.
obviously, if all your mates are around, it's a Saturday night, it kind of works. If you've got a big family that a few people are into it. But a solo 25 quid is quite so. Can we wrap up by my game's gone of the week?
Oh, have none of these been the game's
the
gone?
Arsenal mural
the
kind of
bitching
was,
and moaning
but
for the 50 minutes.
I'd like to think I can see the funny side of that. Cole Palmer has been trying to trademark his cold Palmer celebration. Ollie, you can't trademark a man putting his arms there because he's cold. Like, that's something that's been around for a long fucking time. It's like the equivalent to me was that, like, Carlo Ancelotti trying to like trademark his eyebrow raised, or like, you can't trademark human gestures. Like, when people are cold, they go like this because they're cold. So Cole Palmer trying to trademark cold Palmer. Also, a footballer has obviously done that somewhere before. So how can you, a lawyer, please get in touch? Because how can you trademark that when obviously it's been done somewhere? Like, some footballer in the Bulgarian league will be like, well, hang on, I've been doing that for years. So therefore he doesn't have a trademark on it. are just absolutely bonkers. Cold Palmer. No, you can't trademark that. You're on a healthy wage, mate. Just crack on.
Yeah, if Marco Frioentes did it, then I'd be like, Frio, cold. Yeah, beautiful. That works. But you've got to have the name that rhymes with or sounds similar to the word of cold in whatever language of the country that you're from. Then you can trademark it. I think that you've got to have the name and the celebration constant as well. You've been doing it enough, so I think it's okay at this point. I don't mind it. I think it's funny to try it. People trademark the weirdest stuff. Like the Kardashians tried to trademark something that was already belonged to a company that's massive or something like that. I can't remember what it was now. Like the idea of keeping
because
up with.
Because I think Ronaldo's trademarked his celebration.
Yeah. And that doesn't stop people all over the internet doing it anyway. So I don't know why it matters if you do.
If you have to
trademark a celebration,
so someone else can't do it. But why would they do it? Yeah, I don't. This has got to be the grumpiest. I think maybe because the time.
Merry Christmas.
It's like the end of a long working weekend for me and Wilson. That's what Sunday nights entail. So
I'm just got the NFL alongside me. I'm having a really nice Sunday evening.
Dedicating an entire working life to sport. I've literally just watched sport and worked on sport all weekend as you have as well, Ollie. And then you get to Sunday, it's like, this is what's pissed me off about sport this week.
I think it's just finding a bit of normal sense and thought in the myriad of Twitter and social media opinions that have seemed to integrate it into mainstream sports media as well. That's what we're trying to do. Just have a little bit of common sense with some of this.
That could be our slogan.
Not
Common sense.
another sports bar.